Wife left me a Dear John letter and moved across country. She didn't know I'd already filed for divorce and seized assets. The morning I found that crumpled piece of paper on our kitchen counter, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely read the words. She had written everything in her messy handwriting, the same one I used to find cute when she left me little notes in my lunch bag. Now it felt like poison seeping through my fingers. The letter was short and cold, explaining how she needed space and time to figure herself out. She mentioned feeling trapped in our marriage and needing to find her true self somewhere far away from everything we had built together. What really stung was the part where she wrote about how she had already packed her things and was heading to the West Coast to start fresh. No discussion, no warning, just gone. I sat there in our empty house, staring at the walls we had painted together 3 years ago. The silence was deafening, broken only by the occasional car passing by outside. Everything felt surreal, like I was watching someone else's life fall apart on a movie screen. The coffee mug she had left in the sink still had lipstick marks on the rim, and for some reason that detail made everything feel more real and painful. What she didn't know was that I had been preparing for this moment for months. The late nights when she claimed to be working overtime, the mysterious phone calls she took in the other room, the way she suddenly became protective of her phone and laptop. I'm not stupid, and I wasn't going to sit around waiting for the inevitable. 3 weeks before she left that letter, I had already contacted a lawyer and started the divorce proceedings. The evidence I had collected was overwhelming and heartbreaking at the same time. Bank statements showing expensive dinners at restaurants we never went to together, hotel receipts from weekends when she said she was visiting her sister, credit card charges for lingerie I had never seen her wear. Each piece of evidence felt like a small knife twisting in my chest, but I knew I needed to protect myself legally and financially. My lawyer was a sharp woman who had seen cases like mine countless times before. She explained how in our state, filing first gave me certain advantages, especially when it came to asset division and custody arrangements. We had no kids, which made things simpler in some ways but somehow more devastating in others. At least children would have been something good that came from our marriage. The most important step was securing our joint accounts before she could drain them. We had been married for 8 years, and during that time we had built up a decent savings account, owned our house, and had various investments. The thought of her taking half of everything to fund her new life with someone else made my stomach turn. My lawyer helped me document everything and freeze the accounts legally. I remember the night I signed the divorce papers, sitting in my lawyer's office under those harsh fluorescent lights. My hand cramped from gripping the pen so tightly, and I had to stop several times to compose myself. This wasn't how I imagined my life would turn out when I proposed to her on that beach in California 9 years ago. Back then, everything felt possible, and our future seemed bright and endless. The weeks following her departure were a blur of paperwork, court dates, and sleepless nights. I threw myself into work, staying at the office until late hours just to avoid coming home to our empty house. The smell of her perfume still lingered in the bedroom, and I found myself sleeping on the couch most nights because being in our bed felt too painful and strange. Friends and family started reaching out once word got around about what happened. Some were supportive, offering to help with anything I needed, or just lending an ear when I needed to vent. Others seemed to think there must have been something I did wrong, that marriages don't just end without both parties being at fault somehow. Those conversations were the hardest because part of me wondered if they were right. My brother came to stay with me for a few days, and his presence helped more than I expected. He didn't try to give me advice or tell me everything would be okay. He just hung around and made sure I ate actual meals instead of surviving on takeout and beer. We watched old movies late into the night, and for brief moments I could almost forget about everything that was happening. The first major surprise came about a month after she left. I was at home sorting through some of her belongings that she had left behind when my phone rang. It was my lawyer, and she sounded excited in a way that made me pay attention immediately. Apparently, my wife had tried to access our joint savings account from wherever she was staying, only to discover that the account had been frozen pending the divorce proceedings. According to my lawyer, she had called the bank in a panic, demanding to know why she couldn't access her own money. The bank representative had to explain that due to the legal proceedings, both parties needed to agree on any withdrawals over a certain amount. The best part was that she had no idea I had filed for divorce yet, since she had left no forwarding address and the papers couldn't be served to her. This was when I realized she had probably been planning to clean out our accounts and disappear completely. The thought of how close she had come to succeeding made me feel sick and grateful at the same time. If I had been less suspicious or had trusted her explanations about her strange behavior, I would have been left with nothing but debt and memories. The next few weeks brought a series of increasingly frantic attempts from her to contact me. She left voicemails that ranged from angry to pleading, trying to get me to call her back and explain what was happening with our accounts. I saved every message on the advice of my lawyer, who said they might be useful later. Listening to her voice after weeks of silence was harder than I expected, and I found myself replaying some of the messages just to hear her speak. Then came the second major twist that I never saw coming. My neighbor, an elderly woman who had always been friendly with both of us, knocked on my door one evening with a concerned expression. She explained that she had seen a man coming and going from our house during the weeks before my wife left, always when I wasn't home. She had thought it was strange, but didn't want to interfere in our personal business. The description she gave me matched someone I knew all too well. It was my wife's coworker, someone who had been to our house for dinner parties and holiday gatherings. Someone I had considered a friend, who had sat at our table and made jokes about his own failed relationships while secretly working to destroy mine. The betrayal felt even deeper knowing it was someone from our inner circle. This revelation sent me into a dark spiral for several days. I couldn't eat or sleep properly, and I kept replaying every interaction I had ever had with this person. All the times he had complimented me on my wife, the way he always seemed to know details about her work schedule, the inside jokes they shared that I never quite understood. The signs had been there, but I had been too trusting to see them. My lawyer was thrilled with this new information because it strengthened our case significantly. Adultery might not carry the same legal weight it used to, but it still mattered in court, especially when it came to asset division. She advised me to hire a private investigator to document their relationship, which felt like something out of a movie but was apparently standard practice in cases like mine. The investigator was a quiet man who wore unremarkable clothes and drove a forgettable car. He explained that my wife and her lover had rented an apartment together in a city about 2,000 miles away, and they weren't being particularly careful about hiding their relationship. Within a week, he had photographs of them together, lease agreements with both their names, and evidence of joint purchases they had made. Seeing those photographs was like getting punched in the stomach repeatedly. There was my wife smiling and laughing with this other man in ways I hadn't seen her smile in months. They looked happy and carefree, walking hand in hand through some downtown area, completely oblivious to the fact that their perfect new life was about to come crashing down around them. The legal proceedings moved forward with surprising speed once we had all the documentation we needed. The court date was set, and my lawyer was confident that we had built a solid case. The only problem was that my wife still hadn't been officially served with the divorce papers, since she was avoiding any contact and had left no forwarding address with anyone we knew. This is where the third major surprise came into play. My wife's sister, who had always been closer to me than to her own sister, reached out to me privately. She explained that she was disgusted by what my wife had done and wanted to help me serve the papers properly. She had been in contact with my wife and knew exactly where she was staying, including the apartment address and her new phone number. The conversation with her sister was emotional and complicated. She apologized repeatedly for her sister's behavior and shared that she had tried to talk her out of leaving the way she did. According to her, my wife had been planning this escape for almost a year, slowly moving money into a separate account and making arrangements with her lover to relocate together. The level of premeditation was stunning and hurtful. Her sister also revealed that my wife had been telling people a completely different story about our marriage. She had been claiming that I was controlling and emotionally unavailable, that she felt trapped and needed to escape an unhappy situation. Hearing these lies being spread about me to justify her actions added another layer of pain to an already devastating situation. With the proper address information, we were finally able to serve the divorce papers. My lawyer arranged for a process server in that state to deliver the documents, and I waited anxiously for confirmation that they had been received. The thought of my wife's reaction, when she realized how thoroughly I had outmaneuvered her, brought me a small sense of satisfaction amid all the pain. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon while I was at work. My wife had been served with the papers while she was at her new job, in front of her coworkers and supervisors. According to the process server, she had gone pale and started shaking when she realized what was happening. She had tried to refuse the documents, but that's not how legal service works, and she was stuck accepting them regardless. Within hours, my phone was ringing with calls from her new number. The voicemails she left were a mix of rage, panic, and desperation. She demanded to know how I had found her, accused me of hiring someone to spy on her, and threatened to fight the divorce proceedings with everything she had. The irony of her feeling violated by my investigation wasn't lost on me, considering what she had put me through. Her lover apparently wasn't as committed to their relationship as she had thought. According to her sister, who continued to keep me updated, he had started distancing himself once he realized that my wife came with serious legal and financial baggage. The fairy tale life they had planned together was looking a lot less attractive when it came with divorce lawyers and court dates. The court proceedings were scheduled for about 6 weeks after she was served. During this time, I focused on rebuilding my life and preparing for what was to come. I started exercising again, something I had neglected during the worst parts of our marriage. I also began socializing more, accepting invitations from friends that I had been declining for months while trying to save a relationship that was already dead. One of the most therapeutic things I did was completely redecorating our house. I painted over the colors we had chosen together, rearranged furniture, and bought new bedding that had no memories attached to it. Each change felt like reclaiming a piece of my life that had been held hostage by her betrayal and abandonment. The financial investigation revealed even more disturbing details about her planning. She had been systematically moving small amounts of money from our joint accounts into a personal account for over 8 months. The total amount was significant, and my lawyer was able to demonstrate a clear pattern of financial deception that would work in our favor during the proceedings. More importantly, we discovered that she had been using our joint credit cards to fund her affair. Hotel rooms, expensive dinners, gifts for her lover, and even the security deposit for their new apartment had all been paid for with money that technically belonged to both of us. The documentation was extensive and painted a clear picture of someone who had been planning to leave me with the bills for her betrayal. As the court date approached, my wife made several attempts to contact me directly. She tried calling from different numbers, sending emails, and even reaching out through mutual friends. All of her communications followed the same pattern: initial anger and accusations, followed by attempts at negotiation, and finally desperate pleas for me to reconsider the divorce proceedings. The most pathetic attempt came about a week before our court date. She showed up at my workplace, looking tired and stressed in a way I had never seen before. Security called me to the lobby, and I found her sitting in a chair, crying and asking to speak with me privately. Against my better judgment and the advice of my lawyer, I agreed to hear what she had to say. She told me that she had made a terrible mistake, that she missed our life together, and that she wanted to come home and work things out. She claimed that her relationship with the other man had been a mistake born out of confusion and unhappiness, and that she realized now that what we had was worth fighting for. The whole performance was convincing, and for a moment I almost believed her. But then she started talking about the money and the legal proceedings, and it became clear that her real motivation was avoiding the consequences of her actions. She wanted me to drop the divorce, unfreeze the accounts, and essentially pretend that nothing had happened. She seemed genuinely shocked when I told her that wasn't going to happen and that I would see her in court. The day of the court hearing was surreal and emotional. I arrived early with my lawyer, and we reviewed our strategy one more time. The evidence we had compiled was overwhelming: documentation of her affair, proof of financial deception, records of her abandonment, and testimony from witnesses who could verify various aspects of her behavior. My wife arrived with a lawyer she had apparently hired at the last minute. She looked nervous and kept glancing in my direction, but I avoided making eye contact. This was the first time I had seen her since that morning I found the letter, and she looked different somehow. The confidence and happiness I had seen in the photographs with her lover were gone, replaced by anxiety and regret. The proceedings were more straightforward than I had expected. My lawyer presented our case methodically, walking through the timeline of events and the evidence we had gathered. The judge listened carefully, asking clarifying questions and taking notes. My wife's lawyer tried to present her side of the story, but they had very little to work with given the documentation we had provided. The most satisfying moment came when the judge addressed the issue of asset division. Based on the evidence of financial deception and adultery, she ruled that my wife would receive significantly less than the 50% split she had been expecting. The money she had secretly moved to her personal account would be considered marital property and subject to division, but the court also awarded me additional compensation for her deceptive behavior. Even better, the judge ruled that my wife was responsible for repaying the joint credit card debt she had incurred during her affair. This included not just the money she had spent on hotels and dinners, but also the costs associated with relocating and setting up her new life. The look on her face when she realized the full financial implications of the ruling was something I will never forget. The house, which we had owned jointly, was awarded to me along with most of our other significant assets. The judge noted that my wife had essentially abandoned the marriage and forfeited her right to claim an equal share of property she had walked away from. My lawyer had prepared me for various possible outcomes, but this was better than our most optimistic projections. As we left the courthouse, my wife tried to approach me one more time. She was crying and saying something about how unfair the whole situation was, but I didn't stop to listen. I had spent months preparing for this day, and now that it was over, I felt a strange mix of relief and emptiness. The marriage was officially over, but the emotional healing would take much longer. The weeks following the court date brought a sense of closure that I hadn't expected. The legal proceedings were finished, the asset division was being handled by our respective lawyers, and my wife had apparently returned to her home state to live with her parents. Her relationship with her lover had ended, just as her sister had predicted, and she was facing the consequences of her choices alone. I found myself sleeping better than I had in months. The stress of the unknown was gone, replaced by the certainty of moving forward with my life. I started making plans that didn't include her, thinking about possibilities that hadn't existed when I was trying to save our marriage. For the first time in years, I felt like I had control over my own future. The final surprise came about 2 months after the court date. I received a certified letter at my house, and for a moment I was worried it might be some kind of legal challenge to the divorce ruling. Instead, it was a handwritten letter from my wife, much longer and more detailed than the Dear John letter she had left behind. In this new letter, she apologized for everything she had put me through. She acknowledged that she had been planning to leave for months, that she had been stealing money from our accounts, and that she had been lying to everyone about the reasons for our marriage ending. She wrote about regretting her choices and wishing she could undo the damage she had caused to both of our lives. The letter also revealed some details about her relationship with her lover that I hadn't known before. Apparently, he had been pursuing her for over a year, slowly convincing her that she was unhappy in our marriage and deserved better. He had painted a picture of a perfect life together, promising her things he had no intention of delivering once she actually left me for him. According to her letter, he had started pulling away from their relationship as soon as the legal complications began. He didn't want to be associated with someone who was going through a messy divorce, and he certainly didn't want to be responsible for helping her pay the debts she had incurred. By the time the court date arrived, he had already moved out of their shared apartment and blocked her number. She wrote about feeling foolish and used, about realizing too late that she had thrown away a good marriage for someone who never really cared about her. She described sitting alone in that apartment, surrounded by the life she had thought she wanted, and understanding finally what she had lost. The regret and self-recrimination in her words were palpable and heartbreaking. The letter ended with her asking for my forgiveness, not because she expected us to get back together, but because she needed to know that I didn't hate her completely. She acknowledged that she had no right to ask for anything from me after what she had done, but she hoped that someday I might be able to remember the good times we had shared without being overwhelmed by the pain of how things ended. Reading that letter was emotionally complicated. Part of me felt vindicated by her admission of guilt and her obvious regret. Another part of me felt sad for both of us, for the way our marriage had ended and for the pain we had both experienced. There was also a small part of me that felt pity for her, knowing that she was facing the consequences of her choices alone. I never responded to that letter. My lawyer had advised me to avoid any contact with her unless it was absolutely necessary for legal reasons, and I felt like engaging with her apology would only complicate my own healing process. Instead, I filed the letter away with all the other documents from our divorce, a final piece of evidence of a relationship that had ended in betrayal and litigation. Life moved forward in ways I hadn't expected. I threw myself into work and social activities, reconnecting with friends I had neglected and exploring hobbies I had abandoned during the difficult years of our marriage. I also started dating again, something that felt strange and exciting after being in a relationship for so long. The world felt full of possibilities that I had forgotten existed. The house that had once felt empty and haunted by memories gradually became a home again. I made it completely my own, changing everything that reminded me of her and creating spaces that reflected who I was becoming rather than who I had been. The kitchen where I found her letter was now painted a different color, and I had replaced the counter where that piece of paper had waited to destroy my world. Looking back on the whole experience, I realized that her betrayal and abandonment were actually a gift in disguise. I had been trying to save a marriage that was already over, working to fix problems that she had created while secretly planning her escape. If she had stayed and continued her affair while pretending to be committed to our marriage, the damage would have been even greater and the healing even more difficult. The legal victory was satisfying, but the personal growth that came from surviving such a devastating betrayal was more valuable. I learned that I was stronger than I had realized, that I could handle crisis and uncertainty without falling apart completely. I also learned to trust my instincts and to take action when something felt wrong, rather than ignoring red flags and hoping for the best. My relationship with her family changed in interesting ways. Her sister remained supportive and apologetic, and we maintained a friendship that helped me process what had happened. Her parents, who had always treated me like a son, were horrified by their daughter's behavior and reached out to express their regret and disappointment. These relationships provided a perspective on her actions that I might not have had otherwise. The financial outcome of the divorce gave me a stability and independence that I hadn't expected. Instead of being left with debt and starting over from nothing, I had the house, most of our savings, and a clear path forward. I was able to make plans and investments that would have been impossible if she had succeeded in her original plan to disappear with half of everything we had built together. Perhaps most importantly, I learned that I could survive the complete destruction of my life as I knew it and rebuild something better. The marriage I had been fighting to save had become a source of anxiety and unhappiness, even before I knew about her affair. The divorce forced me to confront the reality that we had grown apart and that staying together would have been a mistake for both of us. The whole experience changed my perspective on relationships, trust, and communication. I became more aware of warning signs and more willing to address problems directly rather than hoping they would resolve themselves. I also became more independent and self-reliant, less willing to sacrifice my own happiness for the sake of maintaining a relationship that wasn't working. Today, several years after finding that letter on our kitchen counter, I can honestly say that I'm grateful for how everything turned out. The pain and betrayal were real and devastating, but they led to a better life than I could have imagined while I was still married. I'm in a healthy relationship now with someone who values honesty and communication, and I have a level of self-awareness and emotional intelligence that I didn't possess before. The house that once felt like a monument to failure has become a comfortable home where I've entertained friends, hosted family gatherings, and built new memories that have nothing to do with my first marriage. The rooms that once echoed with arguments and silent resentment now ring with laughter and conversation. The kitchen where I found that devastating letter is now where I cook meals for people I care about and who care about me. I sometimes wonder what would have happened if I hadn't been suspicious enough to start the divorce proceedings before she left. Would she have successfully drained our accounts and disappeared, leaving me with nothing but debt and questions? Would I have spent years trying to track her down and recover what was rightfully mine? The thought of that alternate reality makes me grateful for the paranoia and preparation that seemed so painful at the time. The letter she left behind, the one that started this whole chain of events, is still in my possession somewhere among the legal documents from our divorce. I haven't looked at it in years, but knowing it's there serves as a reminder of how quickly life can change and how important it is to be prepared for the unexpected. It's also a reminder that sometimes the worst things that happen to us can lead to the best outcomes if we handle them with wisdom and courage. Her final letter of apology, the one she sent months after the divorce was finalized, taught me something about forgiveness and moving forward. While I never responded to it, reading her words helped me understand that she was human and flawed, just like everyone else. She had made terrible choices that hurt both of us, but she wasn't a monster. She was someone who had lost her way and made decisions that destroyed her own life as much as mine. This understanding didn't excuse her behavior or make what she did acceptable, but it helped me let go of the anger and resentment that had been eating away at me. Holding on to those negative emotions was only hurting me, and letting them go was part of the healing process. I could acknowledge what she had done without allowing it to define the rest of my life. The experience also taught me about the importance of having good legal representation and acting quickly when a marriage is in trouble. My lawyer's advice to document everything and move fast probably saved me thousands of dollars and months of additional legal proceedings. The lesson there is that sometimes protecting yourself legally is just as important as trying to save a relationship emotionally. Looking back, I can see that the signs of her affair and her plans to leave were there long before I consciously recognized them. The changes in her behavior, the secretiveness, the emotional distance, and the unexplained absences all pointed to someone who had already checked out of our marriage. Learning to trust those instincts and act on them, even when it's painful, is something I'll carry with me into future relationships. The whole experience was like going through a fire that burned away everything that wasn't essential, leaving behind only what was strong enough to survive. The marriage that I thought I was losing wasn't worth saving, and the life I thought I was building was based on lies and deception. Starting over from that honest foundation, even though it was painful, was ultimately the best thing that could have happened to me. Today, when I tell people this story, they often focus on the legal victory and the financial outcome. While those things were important and satisfying, the real victory was learning that I could survive betrayal and abandonment and come out stronger on the other side. That knowledge has given me a confidence and resilience that I didn't have before, and it's something no one can take away from me. The house where this all started is still my home, but it's completely different now. Every room has been changed, every memory has been replaced, and every corner holds new experiences that belong only to me. Sometimes I stand in that kitchen and remember the morning I found her letter, but now it feels like something that happened to someone else in another lifetime. The man who found that letter was broken and desperate. The man who lives here now is whole and free.